there's a feeling that happens to a teacher, and unless you've taught, you won't know. You can hurt. You can be upset. The world is, to you. You walk into the classroom, you close that door, and you're in a different world. It's them and you. And that's what it's all about. Close that door, and you say, hi, and they go, hi, and next 3 hours, leave me alone. There's nothing more exciting than being in the retail business, because no day is exactly the same as the day before. I tell my students this. I said, if you really want to make sure that you want to go into retailing, that you want to be a buyer or a merchandise manager or a planner, go into different stores. Go into Lord & Taylor's, go into Macy's, go into Bloomingdale's, go into Saks Fifth Avenue, and just go and stand in the middle of the main floor and listen. And each store has a beat all its own. Now, you may be standing there and that beat's going like this, and you say to yourself, I don't want to work here. But then again, there'll be some stores have a beat like, you don't want to work there either. Back in the 70s and even the 80s, the fashion business was not full of diversity. The fashion business was a white person's business. We still had lots of immigrants, but, they just kept to themselves and did not become part of the educational part of this. And I'm very happy today that we have such diversity in our student clubs. We have one called BRAG, that stands for Black Retailers Action Group. And our students are holding vice presidential, presidential, top jobs in the industry today, to the point that when they give their annual dinner, it's covered in all the newspapers in the city of New York. We have an Indian club. We have a Latino club. It is just a different view here now for us, and I think it's so exciting for the students to be able to see what they used to think was a stranger and they did not want much with, all working together and learning together and going out into the market and working together. And I think the last 5 years has been marvelous in that direction. Starting back in '80, the school became very aware of the fact that this is a one world, not a one country business. And as I say, Arthur Price and a few other faculty members from design and production and myself used to travel every year around the world. We went to India, you name it, and we went. To talk to the governments of those countries about educating people for our industry, because our industry was beginning to do more business over there, but the help wasn't trained correctly and so on. And it became, as I say, very successful. We trained them very well. However, at the same time, we realized that it is as important for our students to go overseas and spend 6 months or a year in these different countries and learning what goes on in their countries, in our industry. But more importantly, are there differences? And there are differences between people. But when you live among people is when you really get to know them and they get to know you. So today, we send students, 5, 6, 7, 8 different colleges around the world where they spend either a semester or a year or 2 years. And it's working out very, very well. And of course, we are getting students from all over the world. We have a huge amount of Asian students. We're beginning to get more and more South American students. And that's wonderful, because that's how they get to know one another and not just read terrible headlines. My hat's off to FIT. simply means that you've been here for 25 years, you're old, and you get a desk all to yourself. I have enjoyed all the years that I am here at FIT, and I would like to tell you about all the wonderful things that have gone on in the last 30 years that I've been here, and all the wonderful people that I work with, and the absolutely glorious students that I met with every day.
Doris, we finished Shirley Maclaine. The minute you walked in the joint, whatever that show was.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, with the girls. Anyway, that's hard. That was the. It was based on this movie. It's based on this movie, this Italian movie that Fellini directed, and she's in it. And all these terrible things happen to her, and there's this parade passing her by, and at the end of the movie, she gets into the parade. She's walking, and the final moment is just her. She lifts her head up, puts her chin up, and keeps walking, and that's the end of the movie. Isn't that fabulous? Okay, all right. You now talk to me. All right?
Okay.
And give me the same thing you did before, but just talk to me right across over here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Elaine Stone, and to be very professional about it, I'm Professor Emerita
One more
Elaine
thing.
Stone.
This
My
back
legs
here.
are-
This. Help if I had the mic by me.
Yeah.
How about that? All right. All right. So, all right. Give it to me again, kiddo.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Professor Elaine Stone, and officially I'm a Professor Emerita, which means you have spent more than 25 years at a college and done some what they consider remarkable things. And what I'd like to do with you today is take my very beginning here at FIT and go through the almost 32 years that I've been here now, and all the remarkable, exciting, wonderful things that have happened here at FIT that I was happy enough to be part of. And I guess the first thing was, who and what was FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology?
Great. Let's stop right there for a second. Better if you don't actually hold the mic, because then we're going to get some mic noise. All right.
Okay.
All right. We can kind of have it there. And it looks good. Let me just try one other little thing. Fantastic. Give me a look over here.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. Right there. This is what I like. Look at that. Okay? I think it looks great. All right? And I want to do that one more time right from, because now I got your, before I was kind of cutting off your hat just a bit, and I just want to do that. And that looks fantastic. And I just want to scoot it over this way just a little bit and get you just off camera. One more time, and let's just go from there.
Okay.
All righty. Go for it. And keep talking to me. Stay up
All
and
right.
talk to me.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Elaine Stone, but my official name here at FIT is Professor Emerita Elaine Stone. But my very favorite people here at school, the students, call me the Hat Lady, which makes me very happy. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my travels with the Fashion Institute of Technology for the last 30 years. 30 years, that's such a long time. But wonderful things have happened here based on a fantastic industry that we support, and they support us, and really the remarkable people who started the whole idea of a college of fashion for an industry that at that time was one of the leading industries here in the city of New York. And I became conscious of it in, I guess about 1969 or so, when every day I took the bus down 7th Avenue from where I lived at Columbus Circle to my place of employment, which was on 18th Street between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue. And during that time, every time we went past 28th Street, 27th Street, 26th Street, everybody began to mumble. And finally one day I asked the bus driver, I said, "What's going on here?" Oh, he said, "The community's very upset." I said, "What about?" He said, "Well, there's a little school, they have one building, and now they want to take over the entire block to build this big, big school." And I said, "Well, what's the school about?" And he said, "Well, it's some kind of a fashion school." And I said, oh, that sounds wonderful. But at that time, a school by the name of Toby Coburn was very, very popular. And I had spent most of my years at Macy's and other department stores, and now I was working for Mangles on 18th Street. And at Christmas time, we always got Toby Coburn students. But about a year after this school did get the okay from the city and the state and the people who lived here, Mangles did hire some FIT students to do internships at Mangles. And that's really when I began to be aware of them at all. Well, to make a long, sad story short, Mangles, like many, many other stores and corporations at the time, went bankrupt. So I began looking for a job, but I must admit that for the last 3 years before that, I went back to school. I went back to NYU to get my master's in teaching. I just felt that I had had such a wonderful time in this business called fashion that I wanted to go, when I retired, back and teach other, particularly young women, how to make careers in the fashion business. And it just so happened that place went bankrupt. I got my master's degree, and somebody said to me, I think an old friend of yours from Macy's is now a chairperson at the Fashion Institute of Technology. And his name was Newt Godnick, and he was the chair of the fashion merchandising department. And I went up and said, I think I'd like to teach here. And he said, we'd love to have you. So in 1975, I started teaching at night to this wonderful, wonderful group of young people who wanted to get into the fashion business. And that was my beginning.
Perfect. Great. This looks really, really good. And I want to... How you doing?
Okay.
Would you like some water?
No.
You doing good?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Alrighty. Okay. So that's how you got here.
That's how I got here. And within a year, no, right away I became what is known as an adjunct, which is a part-time teacher. But instead of just teaching at night, I also took day classes.
One second, Elaine. Make sure you stay sitting up in your chair.
Oh.
Fabulous. There you go.
That's the hardest part.
Sitting up and talking to me across the room.
Yes.
All right, go for it again.
Okay. To make a long story short, within 2 years, in 1977, there was a full-time opening for a full-time teacher at the instructor level in FMM. And I was proud enough to say that the people in that department elected me to become the next full-time teacher in September of 1977. So that kind of started my whole new life. I'd had a wonderful, wonderful career in fashion, in retailing primarily, and now I was starting on another career.
That's great. I'm just going to move that a little bit away from your knee. You know, it's really interesting. I think Barry was talking about how chairs had to be elected, so faculty had to be elected as well?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Hang on a second.
But that was a union thing. Up until then, the president could appoint anybody. But the union said no. They have to be elected.
Really? If you're comfortable just like that, that's great.
Oh,
Keep
I
talking.
am.
Go
Okay.
for it.
So what we were talking about, my new job.
That's right,
The
your
one
new
I
job.
adored. The feeling in this school in those years was like a welcoming from the largest family you've ever had. Everybody was interested in you, excited to have you, and so supportive that really and truly you look forward to come to work every day. Because not only were you working with these extraordinary students, but the faculty and the staff and the people here at school were just the nicest people in the world, to put it very, very plainly. And Isn't that a perfect job, to love everybody you work with? My background, as I say, was mostly in department stores. And for about 10 or 12 years before I left the industry, I traveled abroad, primarily to the European markets. And I enjoyed it. It was when foreign goods was something new and exciting and different in the stores, and it was quite an education going overseas. So, when in about 1980, a fellow by the name of Arthur Price, who was a chairperson here also, said that it would be time now for FIT to go abroad and see how people were educated in other countries in our business. And I traveled with Arthur and other members from the community for the next 20 years. And what we did was, primarily in Asia, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Hong Kong, and then finally in China, we were hired by the governments to come and help educate their students in their countries. And I guess we did a very good job, because they're all so good now that they've taken some of our jobs away. But that's the way it is. Education is something that has to move worldwide. And it's probably one of the most important things that parents look for their children. And that's another thing. Back in the 70s and even the 80s, the fashion business was not full of diversity. The fashion business was a white person's business. We still had lots of immigrants, but, they just kept to themselves and did not become part of the educational part of this. And I'm very happy today that we have such diversity in our student clubs. We have one called BRAG, that stands for Black Retailers Action Group. And our students are holding vice presidential, presidential, top jobs in the industry today, to the point that when they give their annual dinner, it's covered in all the newspapers in the city of New York. We have an Indian club. We have a Latino club. It is just a different view here now for us, and I think it's so exciting for the students to be able to see what they used to think was a stranger and they did not want much with, all working together and learning together and going out into the market and working together. And I think the last 5 years has been marvelous in that direction. But we did a lot of things even back in the 70s. We were a slightly warmer, maybe less organized group of people. However, I think the difference almost today is we all loved not only our own jobs, but we loved the school. We loved the students. We loved the other people. And as it happened now in this generation, that no longer exists quite like it did before. It's a different world. We do things a lot differently than we did then. And I think that's probably one of the saddest parts of it, that very almost loving way of being together has now simply become gone. But something new will replace it. But back then, this was a wonderful place for attempting new things. We had a president by the name of Marvin Feldman, who walked the halls and was busy talking to everybody and all the students, and he met with the faculty constantly. And if you had an idea about something new, you went up to him and said, "President, I've got a brand new thing, and I think it's going to be wonderful." And that's how we brought in new departments, new majors, all because there was somebody saying, "Let's try it. What's the worst thing that can happen?" And he also was a very good purveyor of money from the federal government and the state and city government. Excuse me. So I get a little worked up over this because I'm remembering those wonderful days when, and I was fortunate enough, I got a lot of money from the city and the state and the federal government. And finally, Marvin asked me to take over the Small Business Center because we had done a practice with our students about how many of them wanted to be entrepreneurs, how many wanted to work for themselves. And we found that a lot of our students wanted that. So I I'm sorry.
It's okay. No. It's just it's a kind of. You're fine. You're doing fantastic. Your story is great. You're great. Okay. I'm just gonna make sure that this thing doesn't get in your way.
Okay.
All right. There you go. Let me just make sure I'm looking. I love the stories. They're great, and I love what you're saying. You're telling the truth.
So yeah, well, nothing can happen. Anyway, the Small Business Center.
Talk to me over here.
Yes. We started small, but we started again with money from the state, from the educational department of the state, and also from the Department of Labor, who again was very interested to see how young people were interested in being entrepreneurs because it was something that had gone out of style. Early America was all entrepreneurial. Everybody had their own little business or their own little store. And then we went through, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s of big business and big corporations. But there was an interest of the student to say, well, wait a minute, I think I'd like to try it on my own. So that was the beginning of the Small Business Center. And we did a lot of different things. We won a lot of awards, both from the city, and then we won a very prestigious award. We got a federal award, and it was called the E Award for Export. Now, up until that time, that award, given by the president, was only given to a business, a corporation who was doing business in exporting. And we were the first educational institute to win the E Award. And we had a lovely, lovely event here at school, and we had many people from the Department of Commerce in Washington come. And we got a flag to hang up, and big E, and I don't know what's happened to it, but we felt very excited about that. The other thing is we began to send more and more students overseas to actually find out what it was like to work in a foreign country. And again, that was always supported by monies that we got from the federal government. In fact, Marvin used to say, one thing I love about the Small Business Center is it doesn't cost us anything. So again, we all work together, and every other department in school, if we needed something in their expertise, they had no problem helping us. In fact, we gave up the name Small Business Center, and we're now known as the Enterprise Center. And of course, it's grown, and we do all sorts of wonderful, wonderful training. Originally, we did it primarily for women, but now we do training for anybody and everybody who's interested in our particular event. I myself got involved in writing textbooks. And I'm very pleased to say that my textbook, The Dynamics of Fashion, is the #1 selling textbook for the business of fashion in this country. I've written about 6 or 7 different books, and they're used all over the world. And as long as I write books, I'm going to teach, because I think it's very important for somebody who is writing for a student to truly understand and enjoy and learn, that the writer has to know not only the business that they're writing about, but they have to know something about the student who's going to read the book. And that's why I'm going to hang around again for a while, to be with these wonderful students. Again, there was just so many, many things starting here. This was a place that no idea was laughable. And that's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. In fact, we're beginning to see that now in our students. Our students are coming now at the end of class. Professor, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. Well, I have this idea. And that doesn't happen in many schools anymore. You know, the teacher teaches whatever it is, if the teacher teaches it all and not a teaching assistant. Here, if it's listed that you're going to have a certain professor, that professor's going to be there, teaching you, talking to you, encouraging you. And I don't think that really exists that much in schools today. The other part, of course, is the social part of education. And I think, again, we've grown tremendously in this here. Again, all these varied clubs. We go out into the industry and we win contests, and everybody's proud for everybody else. So it makes working here a very, very exciting thing. Are there some downsides? Sure, there's always some downsides. Downside is that money has gotten tight in this particular time. It's not as easy to get as many grants, nor is easier to get money from people, because people are going through a very tough time here. But I must say that the feeling among the faculty and the students is that we're growing. And by the way, that famous Toby Coburn, they're not in business anymore, but we are. The other thing that I think I'd like for people to understand is particularly students who only want to know new. I don't want to know what happened before. All I want to know about is new. Well, I have to tell you, there's a famous saying today, and it came from a famous song, and that's, everything old is new again. Me too.
Fabulous. That's terrific. Are there any particular students that you remember who have gone on?
I have to tell you another story.
Oh, good.
My first class, it was an intro to the fashion business that everybody had to take. And this lovely young woman from the Bronx was my student. And back then, in our particular major, all our students had to go out into the industry and work from Thanksgiving through to New Year's. And they went into all the department stores and things like this. But I had friends from Burdines in Florida, and they said, you know, we'll take a student. And I remember talking to this one student saying, how would you like to go down to Florida? Oh, I love it. Meanwhile, her parents called me, and they were all upset. And I said, well, my mother lives down there, so if you like, my mother will keep an eye on your student. Well, to make a very long story short, she did go down and have her 6-week internship at Burdines. When she graduated 2 years later, she was hired at Burdines. She then met a charming young man who became her husband in Florida. And today, her daughter is now a student of mine. So you do make very nice connections.
That's great.
That's a true story.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
I love it.
And let's see, what else can we
Any
talk
particular teachers that you've worked with that you've...
Well, I would say that one of the things, particularly in the design and business part here, in order to even be considered to be hired as a full-timer, you have had to have spent X amount of years in the industry and at a executive level for anywhere from 7 to 10 years before you can come here. And therefore, I always have great respect for the people who are hired here. They are seasoned, they are well educated, they have done what it is they're coming back to teach. And the only place it doesn't, and every once in a while I tease my friends in liberal arts, but as one pointed out, she said, we have to meet the same rules. I said, oh? She says, yes, we have to have a PhD, which is just like 10 years executive experience, and she's absolutely right. And that's another thing that I think through the years has made FIT different and better than a lot of so-called fashion schools. And that is that we always insisted that half of their credits are in the liberal arts. You cannot get either an AAS degree or a baccalaureate degree just taking major courses. You must be as good in the liberal arts, in sciences and mathematics and economics as you are in whatever your major is. And I think that really makes us way ahead of everybody.
That's terrific. Now, when you came here,
Yeah.
how many buildings were there?
Oh, that's right. Only what is now known as C building was here, okay? Everything was in the one building, which is now the middle building, C building, including the cafeteria. And we all shared desks. You know, nobody had an office. You shared a desk and so on. Of course, by the time I made full-timer in 77, we were finishing up all 4 buildings. And yeah, it's amazing. You know, first of all, FIT started in rented classrooms at the high school around on, 24th or 25th Street. That's how they started. And look where we are now. I mean, it's remarkable. And what I think makes it remarkable is that we've always watched the industry to make sure that when they changed, we changed. So that when our people go out for jobs, they can speak the language that is being spoken now in the retail, designing, store operations that's going on. And now, of course, with not everything mouth to mouth or face to face, with the computers and things like that, we can get so much more done. And again, I think most of our faculty are very good at allowing students to look further than what that particular class is doing. And again, I've always thought that that was one of the most important things at FIT, that we encourage students to look for things beyond what we were doing in the classroom, to do research on their own that might be interesting for the class. And they've all come through. They really, and you know, we have some very famous graduates, as you know. Of course, the most famous ones that people know are the design people, you know, like Calvin Klein and people like that. But in all the other majors, we also have very, very successful students who become vice presidents and presidents, but they don't get the press. In other words, you don't get the press being a president of a apparel maker as you do if you are an apparel designer. But again, our people, we have a very good magazine for the alumni. It's called Hue, and it's always interesting to read about our people and what they're doing. So my hat's off to FIT.
Mm-hmm. So, did you have anything to do with the union?
Well, I'll tell you a little story off the cuff. Lou Stoller was president of the union when I came in, and he was president of the union until he retired. But there was another organization here at school called the Faculty Association. And it was totally separate from the union. There was a union and then the Faculty Association. And I think in 80 or 81, I became the president of the Faculty Association. And up until that time, Lou was kind of tough on whoever was running the Faculty Association. He'd get in the way, he'd come to the meetings and ask embarrassing questions, or he'd try to use the union. And when I was finished with my, at that time it was 1 year, now it's 2 years, I remember I said to him, could I take you to lunch? And he said, okay. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. I said, if you will leave the president of the Faculty Association alone and let them do their job, I will be active in the union. By the way, you have to be a member of the union, whether you want to or not. This is a closed shop. So everybody is a union member. In other words, they deduct the dues from your pay. But you have nothing to do with it. In other words, there are plenty of people like that. I never became an officer, but the funny part of it is that after that first run, as the 1 year, I spent the next 5 years being president of the Faculty Association. We got along very well with the union.
Great, so you're a diplomat.
Yeah, well, we try.
Now you talked about the working relationship that you had with people here, and that clearly, just how did that help you as an educator?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important for people to exchange ideas. There are many ways to teach. There are different tests to give. There are different ways to grade. All of this is left to something called academic freedom. Really and truly, a teacher is free to do anything they pretty much want. But I will say this for the faculty, that particularly a few years ago, we would have meetings weekly, just exchanging ideas. You know what happened in my class? Or, by the way, has this happened to any of you when you did this particular project? And not as much of that is going on as used to. Again, it's a different world. Everybody's in a hurry. Nobody wants to stay extra to have a meeting and to talk. So again, I can't blame people. I just blame the time that we're in. Every once in a while, I remember as a little kid, when you take a test and if people sitting around you would be like this, so you couldn't see anything. We have a little bit of that now, and we'll get past it, because I think it's a big miss that we're not doing more of that.
I want to just check these questions up there.
Yeah.
Let me just see what they've got here. For Elaine, what is FIT's role in the fashion industry and other design industries, and how has its role changed over time? You may have touched on this already.
Yeah, well, we have always been very close to the industries. But again, for many, many years, we only gave a 2-year degree, an AAS degree. And in those days, everybody hired an AAS degree student. However, the department stores, particularly the large ones, locally, the Macy's and the Bloomingdale's, people like that, began to say, no, we want a 4-year college graduate. We want somebody with a bachelor's degree. And Marvin was getting really concerned that it was becoming more difficult to place our 2-year degree students. So, as usual, he called Albany and said, we are a community college. We wish to stay a community college, but we now want to approach some baccalaureate degrees. And when Marvin called Albany, they usually listen. But there is a way here that any school that wants to do something new has to hand it out to all the other schools who give out these degrees. And there were some schools who said no, they didn't want Fashion Institute to give a bachelor's degree, and so on. However, it was worked on for a long time, and we were given the authority to issue a bachelor's degree, but we couldn't do, they didn't want us to give bachelor's degree in liberal arts, okay, because every school was doing that. But they allowed us to give the bachelor's degree in the design area, in the communications area, in the merchandising area. Then came masters, because we also give masters. A lot of people don't realize that. There, we lost one battle, and that battle was that we wanted a master's in the business part of school, and we wanted to make it an MBA. But every school in New York City voted against it, and we give an MPS, Master's of Professional Studies. But knowing how the school works. I'm sure one day we will be giving MBAs here also. Our college degree students get placed anywhere and everywhere. I guess one of the things is they're more mature. There's 2 more years of learning, of maturing, which does help it. But I know in my department, the merchandising department, we have gone far above what we used to teach in the AAS degrees. So that, and then of course staying in 2 more years, they get more liberal arts, they get better economics, they get better at science and math and so on. So I think today we can hold our heads up against any college that is giving AAS, BS, and MA.
Great. It just seems that the students, if the faculty are so professional, meaning that it seems that even the adjuncts work and teach, or all of the experience that the full-time have to have, that must have some effect on the students as well in terms of the way they approach business. Practically speaking, they're more practical than maybe from other schools?
Well, something happened about 10 years ago that I don't approve of, okay? Right there. And that was one of the vice presidents for student affairs felt that it should be one college, because up until that time we basically were 2 colleges. We had the daytime students, and then we had the evening students. And we had a huge continuing education enrollment. And the people we used to have at night were mostly professionals from the industry who would come in at night to grade themselves up. In fact, many of the stores paid, if they got a B plus or more, the store would pay their tuition. But this particular vice president, under some other president, said he wants to make it a one college concept. So today, any daytime student can register in a continuing ed class as part of their day work. And it has affected our continuing ed, because if a student who is, say, just starting and taking a FM 114, which is an introduction to the fashion industry, it's a basic thing, and this is brand new to that day student, but she either works or she likes to sleep late, or some reason she's taking it at night. Well, it used to be that people from Macy's who were assistant buyers and people like that were in that same class. And it happened to me the first time I was teaching retail mathematics. And at the break, this woman came up to me and she said, are there any other Professor Stones here? And I said, well, there's a Professor Sloan, but he's a man. She said, no, this is a woman. She said, 5 assistant buyers from Macy's had this woman for this course last semester. And she proceeded to give me their names, and I knew them, and so on and so forth. She said, but you can't be the same teacher teaching now what you're teaching and what you taught them last semester. So I said, well, have you heard some of these freshmen give you mathematical answers? Like, what is 2 times 2? And you get an answer 5. So she said, yeah, but I said, I know, but you can't. And that has had I think, a very destructive part of what used to be our industry continuing education. What they're going to do about it, I don't know. What has changed, though, is that we've always had about 500 students. Even when I first came, we had that many. But back then, out of the 11,000, 8,000 were continuing ed students, and 3,000 were daytime students. Now it's just the opposite. And money-wise, that's much better for the school, because daytime students pay more, and we also get money from all the boroughs that they come from. So since I'm not the treasurer, but from a teaching point of view, I'd love to go back to certain classes at night just for professionals from the industry, which I think they do some of in the professional studies and hot topics down there.
I think they do, from knowing from what they're teaching down there, talking to Joan and them. I think for the most part, let's just see.
We're doing more training overseas, more and more of our students.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
As I say, starting back in '80, the school became very aware of the fact that this is a one world, not a one country business. And as I say, Arthur Price and a few other faculty members from design and production and myself used to travel every year around the world. We went to India, you name it, we went. To talk to the governments of those countries about educating people for our industry, because our industry was beginning to do more business over there, but the help wasn't trained correctly and so on. And it became, as I say, very successful. We trained them very well. However, at the same time, we realized that it is as important for our students to go overseas and spend 6 months or a year in these different countries and learning what goes on in their countries, in our industry. But more importantly, are there differences? And there are differences between people. But when you live among people is when you really get to know them, and they get to know you. So today, we send students, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 different colleges around the world where they spend either a semester or a year or 2 years. And it's working out very, very well. And of course, we are getting students from all over the world. We have a huge amount of Asian students. We're beginning to get more and more South American students. And that's wonderful, because that's how they get to know one another and not just read terrible headlines.
Mm-hmm. So, a memorable personal moment here.
Oh, my memorable personal moments. I guess, yes, I did spend a year as a dean. Yes. I was the dean for continuing education and professional studies for a year, because when Joyce came, the job was kind of open, and she asked me if I would act as it, and I said yes, and I had a wonderful time. And then we hired somebody to, take it on full time. But that was fun. I really loved that. I had the Enterprise Center, and I was still going overseas, and I was also the dean. And I got out into the industry a lot when I was the dean of continuing ed. So that was a really great time. And of course, all the awards. I love them. I have crystal and beautiful sterling silver things over the house, and I look at them, and the kids look at them, and they say, she must have known what she was doing. So, but there's a feeling that happens to a teacher, and unless you've taught, you won't know. You can hurt. You can be upset. The world is, to you. You walk into the classroom, you close that door, and you're in a different world. It's them and you. And that's what it's all about.
That's amazing. Barry was talking about the exact same thing. It's the relationship between you and the student.
Absolutely. It's like a different world. Sometimes I've walked in and I've been here all day and something went wrong, something in the family. Close that door and you say, hi, and they go, hi, and next 3 hours, leave me alone.
You're on. It's on stage, isn't it?
That's it. In fact, I used to say that. Showtime! And that's what it is a little bit, showtime.
Do you have any people who were mentors or influences to you?
Well, of course, Marvin Feldman. He was, I think, a great influence on many of us back in those days. A lady by the name of Jeanette Jarno, who really was the lady who started it was called Fashion Buying and Merchandising Department, because when FIT first started, it was a design school. And she brought in the business and technology side of it, and the merchandising and AC. And she also was the one who convinced me to write textbooks. And then also a teacher at NYU who was very, maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but when I first started at NYU, I was there, 2 or 3 weeks, and I came home to my parents, and I told them that I was leaving NYU. So they said, really? What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go on the stage, and I'm going to move out of the house, and I'm going to live in the village. And they nodded their head, and they said, okay. I don't know whether it was the next day or the day after that. They sat down with me, and they said, well, if you don't want to stay at school at NYU, we have tickets to send you down to Florida to an all-girls school, and you will learn what we want you to learn. And I said, Florida? All-girls? So that's when I went back to NYU. But I always wanted to be on the stage. I have people in the family who are in show business, and I thought I'd love it, but no talent. So I became a retailer and then a teacher.
Clearly theatrical, though.
Yeah, I hope so.
Now tell me about the hats.
Oh, well, the hats go way, way back to my first job, because before that I also had fancy hairdos, and we would tease it and all that. But at Macy's, the lady who I worked in the handbag department when I first got there, and she merchandised millinery. It was called millinery then. And you couldn't work in her division unless you wore a hat. If she caught you coming to work without a hat, she'd fire you. So you got used to it, and then over the years I discovered I get an extra half hour's sleep because I don't have to do anything with my hair. I just put my hat on. Okay.
Great.
Another very exciting thing that's possible here.
Let's start from the beginning again. Go for it.
Another very important and enjoyable thing that faculty does here at FIT is speak at other colleges around the country and around the world. The faculty here at FIT is really considered to be the experts in anything to do with fashion. And I myself have spoken all over the country here, and as I say, I've been guest speaker at seminars in India, in Hong Kong, and places like that. So again, it's another reason for us who are, particularly the full-time faculty, who put in full-time, to be kept up to date, and as up to date as they possibly can be. And we do have a reputation for just that. That the faculty here, just because they have a full-time job and they know they're going to be here a long time, are still talking about section managers in department stores. That's not true here. Our people keep themselves up to date. They go out on their own. They belong to all the clubs that are important in the industry. And again, I find it very exciting, and they do too.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Anything else did we forget that you're thinking
I
of?
don't know.
Now that we stirred the pot?
Yeah. All right. Speaking of the awards, all the different awards.
Anecdotally, just for me,
Yeah.
why don't you explain to me what it was like to just live and work in New York in the fashion business, because it's such a big part of being FIT, being in New York, and back then when you first started out. Barry talked about how he came to work. And
Well, for me, it was a bit of a letdown. There's nothing more exciting than being in the retail business, because no day is exactly the same as the day before. In fact, the morning can be a lot different than the afternoon. So in a way, I kind of missed that very now feeling that whatever I did, and by the way, that's one of the things that I don't approve of in retailing, but they're always looking over their shoulder. What did you do yesterday? Well, forget yesterday. Yesterday's gone. Let's worry about today. No, they're always worried about last year's figures and things like that. But coming into work every morning, I never knew what the day was going to be like. I didn't know that an ad, or we ran a big ad and there's a big snowstorm and nobody's coming in to buy my handbags. You don't have that here. That kind of pressure is not here. And in fact, I tell my students this. I said, if you really want to make sure that you want to go into retailing, that you want to be a buyer, a merchandise manager, a planner, go into different stores. Go into Lord & Taylor's, go into Macy's, go into Bloomingdale's, go into Saks Fifth Avenue, and just go and stand in the middle of the main floor and listen. And each store has a beat all its own. Now, you may be standing there and that beat's going like this, and you say to yourself, I don't want to work here. But then again, there'll be some stores have a beat like, you don't want to work there either. So you have to make sure that you get to be where you, want to be, and where you're happy and comfortable being. And every store has a beat, and you have to make sure that you're tapping to the right beat for yourself.
It's fabulous. Good for you.
That's true. That is true.
I love it.
So that's it. Oh, I could talk forever, but...
Anything else, Auntie Mame?
There is one thing on there that I think it was the first year she was here. We had a faculty staff talent show. And I was one of the people. And I was all dressed up in hats. In other words, I had here and here and here. And you know the song that the strippers sing from Gypsy? You gotta have a, what's the name of that song?
Gimmick.
You have to have a gimmick. Well, I rewrote the lyrics about teaching and you gotta have a hat. And it's hysterical. And I would love if she could get that one going.
That's on one of those tapes?
Yeah, in fact, the tape says the fashion show or the talent show, just Elaine Stone's segment.
Well, Greta, James, everyone else on the Diversity Council, if you get nothing else transferred, get that tape transferred.
Oh, God.
All right.
I like that.
All right, if it's not...